If you found this video, it's not by accident. Carl Jung would say you found it because you're ready for what it contains, not intellectually ready, psychologically ready. Something in you is breaking down, falling apart, or dissolving, and you're searching for understanding of what's happening. Here's what Jung understood that most people miss. Psychological crises aren't random breakdowns. They're structured transformations with predictable patterns. And you're not falling apart. You're being taken apart so you can be reconstructed. Most people experience crisis as chaos. Everything stable becomes unstable. What worked stops working. Who you were feels impossible to be. Where you were headed feels meaningless. The entire structure of your life seems to be dissolving, and you can't see what's coming next. This feels like failure, breakdown, collapse. Like something's wrong with you, like you're losing yourself, and everyone around you confirms this. They see you falling apart and want to put you back together the way you were. But Jung discovered something radical. These crises are how the psyche reorganizes itself for the next stage of development. They're not breakdowns. They're breakthroughs disguised as breakdowns. Not failures, but initiations. Not endings, but deaths that precede births. He called these moments psychological crises of transformation, and he insisted they follow specific patterns. You're not the first person to go through this. You're going through something as old as consciousness itself, an archetypal process that every individuating person must experience. And if you're in it right now, these 5 realizations will help you understand what's actually happening. Not to make it comfortable, Jung never promised comfort, but to help you see the pattern you're inside of and trust the process that's dismantling you. Let's begin with the first realization. The first truth Jung would want you to understand, especially if you're in crisis right now, changes everything about how you interpret what's happening. What you're experiencing as breakdown is actually breakthrough. The structure that's collapsing needed to collapse. This isn't failure, it's transformation beginning. Here's what's really happening. You've outgrown the psychological structure you've been living in. The identity, beliefs, relationships, career, worldview, all of it was appropriate for who you were. But you've been growing, and that growth has made your old structure too small. It can't contain who you're becoming. Think of it like a tree that's been growing in a pot for years. The pot served its purpose. It contained the young tree, gave it structure, protected the roots. But as the tree grows, the pot becomes a prison. The roots circle endlessly. The trunk can't expand. The branches can't reach their full span. Eventually, the tree's growth will either crack the pot or the tree will become permanently stunted. What looks like the pot breaking, the container shattering, the structure collapsing, isn't destruction. It's the tree's growth finally overwhelming what was meant to contain it. The pot breaking is how the tree gets free. Jung observed this pattern constantly. Patients would come to him in crisis, marriages ending, careers collapsing, beliefs dissolving, identities fragmenting. They'd describe it as breakdown, failure, loss. And Jung would say, this isn't breakdown, it's breakthrough. Something in you has become too conscious for the structure you've been living in. The structure is breaking because you're breaking through. This is what's happening to you right now if you're in crisis. Something in you has become too conscious, too authentic, too real for the life you've been living. And the psyche is doing what it must, dismantling the false to make room for the true. It doesn't feel like breakthrough because breakthrough looks like collapse from the inside. You can't see what's emerging because you're still identified with what's dissolving. But Jung promises, this breakdown is the breakdown of what wasn't real. And on the other side is something more authentic than anything you've built before. When you understand this, that your breakdown is actually breakthrough, it doesn't make the crisis comfortable, but it changes your relationship to it. You stop fighting the dissolution and start trusting it. Stop trying to put yourself back together the old way and start letting something new emerge. Understanding that breakdown is breakthrough is the first shift. But this second realization goes deeper, explaining why the loss feels so devastating and why it's absolutely necessary. What you're losing, the identity, relationship, career, belief, or life structure, needed to die. Not because it was bad, but because it was complete. And you couldn't kill it consciously, so the psyche killed it for you. This is difficult to accept, because what's dying often wasn't obviously toxic. Maybe it was good, maybe it served you, maybe you worked hard to build it. But here's what Jung understood. Something can be good and still need to end. Something can serve you for a phase and become an obstacle in the next phase. Most people try to carry everything forward, all their identities, achievements, relationships, beliefs. They accumulate rather than shed. And the psyche can't tolerate this forever. Eventually, it forces a death. Not from cruelty, but from necessity. Because you can't become the next version of yourself while clinging to the previous version. Jung called this psychological death, the necessary ending of what you've been so that what you're becoming can emerge. And he noticed people resist these deaths desperately. They try to save the dying identity, revive the dead relationship, resurrect the collapsed career, reconstruct the shattered belief. But the psyche is killing it for a reason. It's not random loss, it's strategic death. What's dying needed to die because it was preventing growth. One of Jung's patients, a woman in her 40s, lost everything in a 2-year period. Her marriage ended, her career imploded, her religious faith dissolved. She came to Jung devastated. I've lost everything I was, everything I believed, everything I built. I don't know who I am anymore. Through analysis, Jung showed her something profound. Each thing she lost had become a prison. Her marriage was maintaining a persona, not intimacy. Her career was proving her worth, not expressing her gifts. Her faith was providing certainty, not supporting genuine spirituality. Everything that died was something she'd unconsciously outgrown, but couldn't consciously leave. Jung told her, your psyche is killing what you couldn't kill yourself, not to destroy you, but to free you. These deaths feel like loss because you're still identified with what's dying. But soon, you'll see they were liberations disguised as losses. This is what's happening in your crisis. What you're losing, whatever it is, has become an obstacle to your growth. Maybe it was perfect for who you were 5 years ago, but you've changed, you've grown, you've become more conscious. And that growth is incompatible with the old structure. The psyche is doing what you couldn't do consciously, killing what needs to die so you can grow. And it feels devastating because death always does. Even necessary death. Even death that's ultimately liberation. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly. The things people grieve most in crisis are often the things that were limiting them most. The identity that dies was constricting authentic expression. The relationship that ends was preventing real intimacy. The belief that shatters was blocking genuine truth. The career that collapses was using energy meant for something else. What you're experiencing as loss is actually release. But you can't see that yet because you're still in the death phase. The birth hasn't happened. The new hasn't emerged. You're in the space between where the old is dead but the new isn't born. And that space is terrifying. But Jung promises, what's dying needed to die. Trust the death. Stop trying to resurrect it. Let it go completely. Because only in complete death can complete rebirth happen. When you accept that what you're losing needed to die, you stop fighting the loss. Stop trying to save what the psyche is killing. Stop grieving as if something essential died, and start recognizing that something constricting is being removed. If the first two realizations help you understand the death phase, this third one explains the most unbearable part, the confusion, uncertainty, and not knowing that fills the space between death and rebirth. The confusion you're experiencing isn't a problem to solve, it's the transition itself. You're supposed to not know. The uncertainty is the space where transformation happens. Most people experience crisis confusion and immediately try to eliminate it, make a plan, find answers, get certainty, decide on the next path. They treat confusion as a problem that proves they're failing at the crisis. But Jung discovered, confusion is the natural state between identities. You're no longer who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. The old structure is dead, but the new one hasn't formed. You're in psychological limbo, and limbo is supposed to be uncertain. Think about any transformation in nature. A caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly through smooth transition. It enters the chrysalis and completely dissolves. There's a phase where it's neither caterpillar nor butterfly. It's liquid chaos. Imaginal cells creating something new from the dissolved old. If you could interview the caterpillar becoming butterfly in that moment, it would say, I don't know what I am. I'm not what I was. I can't see what I'm becoming. I'm just soup. Complete confusion. That dissolution isn't a problem. It's the transformation itself. You're in the chrysalis. You've dissolved. You're not what you were, and you can't see what you're becoming. And your mind is desperate for certainty, answers, direction. It wants to know, who am I now? What should I do? Where am I going? What's the meaning of this? But Jung says, you're not supposed to know yet. The confusion is doing something. The not knowing is creating space. The uncertainty is preventing you from rebuilding the old structure prematurely. This is counterintuitive because everything in you wants to escape confusion, make decisions, choose a direction, build a new identity, get solid ground again. But rushing this process creates premature closure. You reconstruct yourself before you've fully dissolved. You build a new version of the old structure instead of allowing something genuinely new. Jung observed this repeatedly. People in crisis would grasp at answers, new relationships, new careers, new beliefs, anything to escape uncertainty. And they'd rebuild their lives quickly. But 5 years later, they'd be back in crisis because they'd rebuilt unconsciously. They'd created another version of what needed to die instead of allowing genuinely new structure. The confusion phase requires something difficult. Surrender to not knowing. Not as giving up, but as conscious patience. Trusting that the psyche is reorganizing itself beneath conscious awareness. That answers will emerge when the transformation is ready. That certainty will return when the new structure is actually formed, not when your anxiety demands it. If you're in this phase right now, if you feel lost, confused, directionless, uncertain about everything, Jung would say, This is exactly where you should be. The confusion isn't evidence you're doing it wrong. It's evidence you're doing it right. You've let the old die, you haven't forced premature rebirth, and you're in the sacred space between where transformation actually happens. Stay in the confusion a bit longer. Don't rush to answers. Don't grasp at certainty. Don't rebuild prematurely. Let yourself not know. Let yourself be uncertain. Let yourself float in the fog. Because in that space, something authentic is forming that couldn't form in certainty. If you're recognizing yourself in these patterns, experiencing breakdown as breakthrough, grieving necessary deaths, floating in confusion between identities, you're not lost. You're exactly where Jung said you'd be during genuine transformation. This isn't easy, it's not comfortable, but it's structured. You're inside a process as old as consciousness itself. Death, dissolution, confusion, and eventual rebirth. And understanding the pattern doesn't remove the difficulty, but it changes your relationship to it. Before we explore the final two realizations that reveal what's actually emerging from this crisis, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Let's continue because these final realizations show you what this crisis is preparing you for. The first three realizations explain the death, the grief, and the confusion, but this fourth one reveals what's actually happening beneath all of it, even when you can't see it yet. You're not being destroyed, you're being reconstructed. The dissolution you're experiencing is making space for reorganization at a deeper level of authenticity. Here's what Jung understood. The psyche doesn't destroy without purpose. When it dismantles your life, it's not random chaos, it's intelligent deconstruction. It's removing what was built unconsciously, so something can be built consciously. Taking apart the inherited structure, so an authentic one can emerge. But from inside the process, you can't see this. All you see is loss, confusion, dissolution. Everything stable becoming unstable. Everything certain becoming uncertain. It feels like pure destruction, with no reconstruction in sight. Jung would say, that's because reconstruction happens beneath conscious awareness first. The psyche is rebuilding you from the foundation up, but it has to clear the old foundation before the new one can be laid. And you won't see the new structure until the clearing is complete. Think of it like renovating a house. Before you can build the new structure, you have to demolish the old one. During demolition, it looks like pure destruction. Walls torn down, floors ripped up, fixtures removed. Anyone walking through would think, this house is being ruined. But the contractor knows. This destruction is creating space for something better. The worse it looks, the more thoroughly the old is being removed. The demolition isn't random, it's strategic. Every wall torn down reveals pipes that need replacing. Every floor lifted exposes foundation that needs reinforcing. What looks like chaos is actually necessary preparation. You're in demolition. Your psychological house is being taken down to the foundation. And it looks catastrophic. But Jung says, trust that something is being cleared for something better. And the reconstruction is already happening even if you can't see it. Every moment you stay with the confusion, you're allowing deeper organization. Every day you resist rebuilding prematurely, you're creating space for genuine structure. Every time you let yourself not know, you're allowing your authentic self to emerge rather than forcing another false structure. Jung observed that people who trusted the dissolution, who didn't rush reconstruction emerge with lives radically more authentic than what dissolved. Not because they got back what they lost, but because they allowed something genuinely new to form, something that couldn't have formed if they had rebuilt too quickly. If you're in this phase, Jung's promise is, you're being reconstructed. You can't see it yet, because reconstruction happens beneath awareness first. But trust that every piece that's been removed was making space. Every certainty that dissolved was creating room for genuine knowing. Every identity that died was clearing ground for authentic being. You're not being destroyed. You're being deconstructed so you can be consciously reconstructed. And what emerges will be more real than anything that dissolved. The previous realizations explain what's happening to you, but this final one reveals why it's happening and what you're being initiated into. Your crisis isn't random suffering, it's an initiation. You're being prepared for a level of consciousness, authenticity, and depth that requires you to die to who you've been. This is how the psyche creates the space for genuine transformation. Jung studied initiatory processes across cultures and discovered something profound. Genuine transformation always requires a death. Not metaphorical death, experiential death. The old self has to actually die in consciousness for the new self to be born. Ancient initiation rites understood this. They'd put initiates through symbolic death, darkness, isolation, ordeal, dissolution. Why? Because transformation requires the death of who you were. You can't add consciousness to the old structure. You have to die to the old structure so new consciousness can form you. Modern culture has lost this understanding. We think transformation is improvement, adding better habits, beliefs, practices to who we already are. But Jung says, real transformation requires death. The person you are has to end for the person you're becoming to emerge. This is what your crisis is, an involuntary initiation. You didn't choose it, but the psyche chose it for you. Because you'd outgrown your structure, and growth required death of that structure, and you couldn't do it consciously, so it happened unconsciously through crisis. Jung would call this a psychological initiation, where life circumstances create the death that spiritual traditions once created deliberately. Your breakdown is the death phase. Your confusion is the liminal space. Your reconstruction is the rebirth. You're going through what initiates have always gone through, just without the cultural container that helps you recognize it. One patient, a woman in her 50s, experienced total life collapse. Everything she'd built dissolved simultaneously. Marriage, career, identity, purpose. She felt like she was dying. Through analysis, Jung showed her, you are dying. Not physically, but psychologically. The person you've been for 50 years is dying, and you're in the death phase of an initiation. This isn't random suffering, it's structured transformation. You're being prepared for something that required this death. She asked, prepared for what? Jung said, you don't know yet. That's the point of initiation. You die to what you were before you see what you're becoming. But I can promise you, what emerges will be more conscious, more authentic, more alive than what died, because that's what initiation creates. She trusted the process, stayed in the death, didn't rush rebirth, let herself be completely undone. And eventually, something emerged, not a return to her old life, but entrance into something entirely new. A depth, authenticity, and presence that would have been impossible without the complete dissolution. This is what your crisis is preparing you for. Not a better version of your old life, a fundamentally different relationship to existence itself, more consciousness, more authenticity, more depth, more presence, more you than you've ever been. But this requires the death you're experiencing. You can't get to that level of being without this level of dying. The crisis isn't punishment, it's preparation. Not random chaos, it's structured initiation. Not meaningless suffering, it's the death that genuine birth requires. Jung believed these initiatory crises are how consciousness evolves. Not everyone goes through them, only those whose psyches are ready for deeper levels of awareness. If you're in one, it means something in you is ready for what requires this death. When you understand your crisis as initiation, everything shifts. You stop seeing it as something wrong and start recognizing it as something necessary. Stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What am I being initiated into?" Stop trying to end the crisis and start trusting the transformation. You're in the death phase of initiation. It's supposed to feel like dying because you are dying. The old you is dying so the new you can be born, and that birth is coming. Not yet, but it's coming. And what emerges will justify everything the death required. If you found this video, it's because you needed these 5 realizations. 1. Your breakdown is actually breakthrough. What's collapsing needed to collapse. 2. What you're losing needed to die. The psyche is killing what you couldn't kill consciously. 3. The confusion is the transition. You're supposed to not know while reorganization happens. 4. You're being reconstructed, not destroyed. Something authentic is forming beneath awareness. 5. This crisis is initiatory. You're being prepared for consciousness that requires this death. These aren't just comforting ideas. They're the pattern you're inside of right now. Jung spent his career documenting these psychological transformations, and he was clear. The people who emerge strongest from crisis are those who trust the process rather than fight it. Not trust that it won't hurt, it will. Not trust that it's comfortable, it isn't. But trust that it's structured. That breakdown is how breakthrough happens. That death is how rebirth happens. That dissolution is how reorganization happens. You're not falling apart randomly. You're being taken apart systematically. And what emerges from this systematic dissolution will be more authentic, more conscious, more alive than anything that dissolved. Final release plus takeaway. 12:30 to 13:15. If you're in crisis right now, Jung would want you to know. You found this video because you're ready for these truths, not ready for the crisis to end, but ready to understand it while you're in it. The 5 realizations aren't about making crisis comfortable. They're about revealing the pattern so you can trust the process. Your breakdown is breakthrough. Stop fighting the dissolution. What you're losing needed to die. Let it die completely. The confusion is the transition. Stay in not knowing. You're being reconstructed. Trust what you can't see yet. This crisis is initiatory. You're being prepared for something. These truths don't remove the difficulty. Crisis is still hard. Death still feels like loss. Confusion still feels like being lost. But when you understand the pattern, you stop experiencing it as random suffering and start recognizing it as structured transformation. Jung's promise, trust this death. It's creating space for birth. Trust this confusion. It's allowing reorganization. Trust this crisis. It's initiation into something you can't imagine yet, but will recognize as more real than anything you've left behind. You found this video when you needed it, and you'll emerge from this crisis when you're ready. Not when you want to, but when the transformation is complete. If this video found you at the right time, subscribe for Jungian psychology that speaks to those in transformation. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now. Remember, you're not falling apart, you're being taken apart. And what's being built from the pieces will be more real than anything that came before.